So, thank you all so much for coming. Welcome welcome to the When Robots Do Everything, What Will People Do panel.
Should we close the door? No, we should be here.
Yeah. That would probably be helpful.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yes,
Those people are down.
Okay, I'll just move up.
we had MarsCon here 3 months ago, and basically all the doors had to be closed.
Yeah.
So, why don't I will do what I usually do, which is actually defer to the rest of the panel for introductions first. I'll start on my left.
Hi, I'm Jen, but I go by JT Bock. I'm a writer. I write superhero stories with some romance and sci-fi. And this is my first time here, so I'm really excited to be part of the group. I've been a big fan of sci-fi, horror, since I was a child, so it's a big deal for me to be here, so thanks for having me.
I'm Meriah Crawford. I write a lot of different genres, sci-fi, fantasy, mystery, some literary stuff, some really boring scholarly stuff. I teach at Virginia Commonwealth University, research and writing, and I also have a tech background. I worked at Microsoft for 5.5 years. I've done some other techie stuff.
Hi, I'm Doc Coleman. I'm a writer, narrator, and voice actor. I'm still kind of experimenting around with different styles, but I've been writing a lot of steampunk lately. I've got a steampunk story in this book, The Way of the Gun. And I'm working on my first novel-length work, The Perils of Prague, which is going to be the first of a steampunk series.
And good evening. My name is DJ McGuire, and I am a cost estimator in information technology. Been a defense contractor in that role for about 16, 17 years. I also teach economics at Tidewater Community College across the river, and I am a contributor to a local political blog here called Bearing Drift. And that's, I think that pretty much takes up most of my time. So that's just been covered. And for some reason, they put me in charge of this panel. I'm guessing after hearing everybody else, mainly so that I would keep my mouth shut. So, first question I would ask is, as an economist, whenever I see this kind of topic or hear anything about this kind of topic, my mind almost always goes to labor-saving machines, because that's how we dealt with it throughout the second millennium. So my first question would be, what do you think makes the robots that we are talking about or thinking about or writing about different from the labor-saving devices that shaped the second half of the second millennium? And I'll start with the far left.
Oh my gosh. Well, one of the things I was, I reached out to a friend of mine who is actually one of the top robotics engineers. And I asked him the question, kind of sort of what the topics we were talking about, like, will the market take care of everything, and talking about like the governments about keeping it from getting really ugly. He said one of the things that he said he believes that the way the robotics is running right now is that it's going to be something that's going to be a very slow go. That we're not looking for a lot of major shifts in the economic stratosphere, that there's always going to be a need for skilled labor. We're always going to have that, but if you look at like agriculture, 1/100th of the human labor that we're using right now from a century ago. Mm-hmm. So if we're looking at the way robotics are going to appear in the future, where it's going to be going, it's probably going to be a lot of things in the home, like right now we're seeing like the Zumba, which is kind of like a small little robot that's being used in the home right now. A lot of the different labor is going to be maybe like some small like manual labor and things like that might get taken over by that, but it's not going to be anything that's going to be major. It's going to be definitely very gradual.
I do think, and that we raised this before the panel started, one of the really big questions is, what is a robot? What do we mean by robot? I think a lot of us think of that awesome robot on the Jetsons that we're all still waiting for. I'm bitter because I had expectations that are not being met. And I think it's going to be a really long time before we get that robot, or the iRobot level of robot, which would be awesome, minus the killing everybody part. That said, I do think that like the Zumba is a really nice example of a nice automated device that can help you out a lot. But I think most of us have probably heard the stories of, oh God, my dog pooped in the house, and the Zumba tracked it. The Roomba tracked it everywhere. I also, some of my best friends are farmers, and I know it is mind-blowing. Like the $250,000 harvester can operate on GPS. It knows where the field is, and for a good chunk of that, you don't actually have to have your hand on anything and go. But the minute you hit a bump or a deer carcass, say, or a dip, you have all kinds of human interaction. So we're actually, I mean, the hard thing is teaching the machine to problem solve, and we're nowhere near there yet.
So the question was, what's the big difference between the labor-saving machines and the kind of robots we're talking about now? And the big thing with the labor-saving machines of the Industrial Revolution, and even before, is those were designed at doing simple, repetitive tasks. And they started with gross tasks with things like grinding wheat, raising a mallet and pounding it on an anvil, driven by a water wheel, up to more delicate, more complex tasks like the machines that make knitted socks these days. But those were all very rigidly defined tasks. Now we're working on things like the Roomba, which are actually making decisions. They have to sense their environment. If they encounter something, they have to make a decision on how to react. But a lot of those reactions are still defined rigidly by programming. And what we're really looking at in the future, what we're wondering is, what happens when we start building general machines that can operate the same kind of devices that we operate now, and are capable of making their own decisions, seeing their own problems, asking their own questions, and finding solutions. And that's the really fascinating part of it.
Arguably, the self-driving car is sort of at the forefront of that right now. And it's fascinating looking at how many miles they've actually driven and still been successful. I think there was just recently an accident that was arguably the self-driving car's fault. I didn't read a lot about that, but it's interesting. I certainly won't know.
Well, have you guys heard about Robot Earth? I just heard about this concept. Have you guys heard about this yet? I was doing some research on this topic and watching a lot of courses of professors talking about robotics. And Robot Earth is essentially like cloud robotics. So they're talking about it's a way for robots to upload information from what they learn so that other robots can access this. So for example, you might have a robot working in your house, or maybe working in the field like you were talking about with the agriculture and things like that. And they say, okay, when it's a dry season or when we're on this kind of path, this is what's going to happen, or this is the type of issues we're going to have when we're going down this certain path or when we're cultivating this certain grain. It uploads it up to this cloud, which is Robot Earth. And then robots, who are working in the fields in Europe or the fields in Afghanistan can access this information and then download it to their hard drive to understand that when they come in contact with this type of grain, this is what they have to do. So this is sort of like the next generation they're talking about. They're building this cloud now.
Okay, so it's not exactly robot crowdsourcing as much as it is robot information sharing.
Yes, exactly. Like we
this
share
robot
the
has
cloud.
learned something, so it wants to let all the others know in case they. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That would be a nice evolution of Waze. You guys know about Waze?
Yes,
The
I use
app?
Waze daily.
If you don't know it, it's WAZE, and it's a traffic app basically that depends on people using it to say, okay, there's an accident here or whatever. And that, it works surprisingly well. It works better than like if you have a